In today's video, I'm going to show you how to learn any language in 6 months using a lazy way of learning languages. And so all of the methods and all of the activities included in this program are based on my own experience as well as scientific research in second language acquisition. And look, like the truth is, some of you guys probably don't think that learning a language in 6 months is possible, but the truth is, it is possible. All right, you're not going to reach a native level, that's for sure, but you can definitely reach a conversationally fluent level in 6 months. Now, in the past, I have learned multiple languages, like English. I'm speaking English to you right now, and I'm a French speaker. I've never lived in an English-speaking country. I've also learned Japanese. As a matter of fact, as a software developer, I have even developed an app for lazy language learners called Fluent Falcon. I'm going to talk about this later, but you don't need to get it if you want to do this program. So I'm going to divide my advice into 4 categories, because these are the 4 things, the 4 categories of activities that you need to focus on if you want to be fluent in a language in 6 months in a lazy way. The first category of activities is input, and then we're going to talk about output, then deliberate learning, and then fluency development. And each category needs 25% of your attention. If you're spending, 4 hours a week studying, for example, 1 hour has to be input, another hour has to be output, the other one has to be deliberate learning, and the last hour has to be fluency development. By the way, you're going to hear some birds at some point in the video. Sorry about that. So the first thing I want to talk about is input. So let me just start with listening, and then we're going to go on with reading. But at the very early stage, when you're starting to learn a language, even if you don't know a lot about the language and you don't understand when people talk to you, it's actually useful to watch stuff on Netflix or movies, even with subtitles in English. And this is really going to help you get a feel for the language. And maybe you're not going to understand anything, but you're going to get the rhythm and just get a feel for the language. And this is proven to actually help you when you start speaking the language. Now, as your language skills develop, as you become better in the language, you can actually start watching things on Netflix, YouTube, whatever video platform that you like, with English subtitles at first, and then rewatch or just re-listen to the same movie or TV show without subtitles, really paying attention to how things are said and really paying close attention to listening comprehension. So the first time that you actually watch the movie or the TV show with the subtitles, really the goal is to get you to understand the movie or what is going on. And so by doing this repetitive listening, where you actually listen and watch that thing once and understand the context, and then re-listen or re-watch it multiple times, you're actually training your listening comprehension on a movie that you understand what is going on, you understand the context, and this is highly beneficial. And again, this is a guide for lazy learners, so most of the activities in this program are going to be adapted for people who don't want to put a lot of effort in, which is why I'm including a lot of movies and TV shows and so on. Another activity which is highly effective is reading while listening. So let's say that you're watching a movie, right, and you're trying to learn, say, Spanish. So you're watching the movie in Spanish and you put the subtitles on in Spanish, and by reading the subtitles in Spanish at the same time that you're actually listening to what's happening, you're actually going to gain higher vocabulary knowledge. Your comprehension is also going to improve more than just by listening alone. All right, so here's another activity which is simply called transcription. So take something on Netflix, and it shouldn't be too long, let's say about 1 or 2 minutes. And so what you should do is actually play this movie or this video clip and try to write down everything that you hear. And now you can actually re-listen to the same clip multiple times, as many times as needed for you to actually get a complete version of the written script. When you listen to the clip, it's actually okay to pause on some parts of the clip to really make sure that you've understood what is being said. So this activity here, transcription, is actually a very useful activity when it comes to improving your listening comprehension. It gives you some very useful feedback as far as how well can you recognize words, how well can you recognize phrases. All right, so we're still talking about input, but now I want to talk about reading. Now, reading is actually very useful because it's going to help you get repetition of the same words, the same word groups, the same grammatical constructs. And as I said, a very good way to learn a language is actually to read the subtitles while you're watching a movie. But I think there's a bit of a problem when it comes to just reading, because there are a lot of words that you read, but they only come up once or they only come up a few times. You don't have enough opportunities to meet them multiple times and really remember them in the long term. So this is why I recommend that you use a flashcard application. Now, there are plenty of free flashcard apps like Anki, for example. I personally recommend my own application, which is called Fluent Falcon. I'm going to put a link to that in the description. But obviously, you don't need to get Fluent Falcon. You can always get Anki, which is 100% free. Now, as I said, use subtitles in movies to actually get a lot of reading. Now, ideally, the movies should be at the right level for you, meaning that it shouldn't be too hard and it shouldn't be too easy. Now, a lot of times, especially when you're a beginner, it's almost impossible to watch movies in your target language and have a movie that is fairly easy or at the right level. Very often, it's going to be pretty hard. So what you can do in this case when you're watching stuff that is just too hard for you is actually watch TV shows with multiple episodes or multiple seasons, because that way you watch multiple episodes, you watch multiple seasons, and it's always going to be the same vocabulary, the same words, the same word groups, the same grammatical constructs that are going to come up. And so as you read the subtitles, this is going to replicate what is called narrow reading. Narrow reading is really when you want to learn a language and you take a bunch of texts that are about the same topic and you just read that. And because you're reading about the same subject, because it's always the same context, you're really building knowledge of the language on that particular topic, and it's going to become easier for you. So this is something that is called narrow reading, and it's actually very, very useful. Now, if you're at a more advanced level for a language, like if you're above, say, C1, for example, so above 6,000 words, I think it's more useful in this case to actually watch a wider variety of things, because then you get exposed to more vocabulary that you actually do not know. All right, so let's talk about the second category of activities here, which is output. And about 25% of your time should be spent doing output-related activities. And so output is divided into two separate sections. You have speaking and you have writing. So for speaking, I'm only going to give you one activity because I think that this is actually a huge hack. This is actually incredibly effective, and this is something that you should absolutely be doing. And this activity is deliberate memorization of phrases or entire dialogues. If you really want to have phrases readily available for you to actually say, then memorizing common sentences is actually one of the most helpful things that you can do. This makes you speak pretty quickly. This makes for long-lasting and readily available phrases that you can use. And I know this sounds completely stupid, but this is based on research and it absolutely works. So for example, if you're learning Spanish, then you're going to take some phrases that you think may come up and memorize them just by heart. For memorizing, I'm going to suggest Anki here, which is a free app. Link to that in the description. And so deliberate memorization is by far the best activity in terms of learning how to speak. It's not hard and you're going to get some quick results. All right, now let me talk about writing. Unfortunately for writing, I feel like it's very much the case that there is no lazy way to practice writing. So my advice is when I learn languages, my main concern, the main thing I want to do is have conversations with people. I'm not really concerned about training my writing to write emails or write reports, because for me, it's just a hobby. So I would highly encourage you to think about this. Is it really necessary for you to actually train your writing? I think it's okay to do a little bit of it, but if you don't think that you're going to be writing a lot in the language, it's okay to spend less time on it than with speaking and with listening. So as far as training for writing, there are two types of activities that you can do. The first activity is writing that is focused on accuracy. So the goal here is that you take a topic, and ideally something that you've read a lot about, and you write an essay about it. And you take as much time as you want, and you can actually use things like Google Translate, a dictionary. You can get help from anything online. The goal here is really to write accurately and really build up your writing skills. And now the second type of activity for writing, and I'm going to talk about this later, is writing for fluency. So it's essentially you need to train yourself yourself to actually write fairly fast. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but in the meantime, I want to talk about the third category of activities, which is deliberate learning. Now, deliberate learning or deliberate study is what most people think is language learning. We're talking about things like, flashcards or textbooks or, actual studying. I know that this video is about how to learn a language in a lazy way, so we're going to try to limit as much as possible the deliberate learning because it's not fun, it's pretty hard. But truth of the matter is, deliberate learning is extremely effective and extremely efficient. So if you're not doing any deliberate study, you're really missing out. This is a guide for lazy language learners. So I'm going to give you the number one most important activity that you should be doing as a language learner, as far as deliberate study goes. And this is, you guessed it, vocabulary flashcards. To be honest, I don't want to talk about this in every video I make. I just sound like a broken record, but working with word cards or sentence cards is by far the most effective and the most efficient deliberate learning activity. What I mean by this is that you should be using some sort of flashcard app like Anki, for example. So a very simple example here, let's say I'm learning French. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to take the front of the flashcard, I'm going to write hello in English, and the back of the card, I'm going to write bonjour, which is hello in French. And so every time that I see this card, I'm going to see, okay, hello, well, how do I say this in French? And then I think to myself, okay, what is it? Bonjour. All right, I think about the answer. I look at the back of the card, and if this is good, then great. I've actually remembered it, and this actually strengthens my memory of this word in my brain. And so this sort of, what is called spaced retrieval with flashcards is by far the most efficient activity that you can do, and there is tons of scientific research on this. Now, obviously, the problem here is that doing flashcards is not fun. Like, I've burnt out multiple times using Anki because I was doing too much. So there are two possible answers here. The first one is just do less flashcards. So flashcards are incredibly effective, but you need to learn to just do a few flashcards a day. Don't do too much. And the second solution here is I've actually built, again, an app for lazy language learners. So if you don't want to do your flashcards, I have built an app called Fluent Falcon, and this allows you to create audio flashcards where instead of learning and reviewing your flashcards on a computer or on a smartphone, you can just listen to the flashcards. I do this myself on a daily basis to learn Japanese, and I'm getting some great results. So I'm going to put a link to Fluent Falcon in the description, but you don't need necessarily to use Fluent Falcon. You can always use traditional flashcards like Anki. Now, there are other ways of learning vocabulary. This is like more advanced strategies for learning vocabulary. Put a comment down in the comment section below if you want me to make more videos on advanced techniques and methods for learning vocabulary. All right, now the fourth category of activities I want to talk about is fluency development activities. What I really mean by fluency development is that you need to develop the ability to best use what you already know. So the goal here is that you're not going to learn new vocabulary, you're not going to learn new grammar construct, but you're going to get really fluent with the stuff that you already know. So think about this, for example. I'm sure if you've learned a new language, you've had this problem, right? Where like you learn the numbers in Spanish and you know them, but you go to Mexico or whatever, and then at the register, the cashier actually tells you a number and they say it so fast that you don't know what it is. And this is because you lack fluency in listening. So what I really mean by fluency here is there's like a speed component, meaning that you need to have a certain speed in your listening comprehension. You need to be fluent in speaking, and the same thing goes for writing and reading. Now, I think it's much more important to develop fluency in listening and speaking, especially if you're like me, just trying to have conversations with people. So I'm going to give you some activities to develop your fluency. First, I'm going to start with listening fluency. So the thing that you can do here is you can watch stuff on Netflix or even on YouTube in your target language, and you can actually play with the playback speed. So you can watch stuff using slow speed at first to make sure that you understand everything, and over several days you just increase the speed at which you watch the same same stuff until you reach normal speed and you can understand everything. All right, now to train your speaking fluency, there's a well-known activity called 4-3-2, which is you prepare some sort of dialogue, some sort of topic that you're going to talk about for 4 minutes. And then you talk about the exact same stuff a second time, and you need to cover everything. You need to talk about the same thing, but only 3 minutes. And then you do the exact same thing, but only 2 minutes. So you're trying to talk about the same thing, use the same sentences, but do it faster and faster. 4 minutes, 3 minutes, and then 2 minutes. And this is how you train speaking fluency. Now, for reading fluency, there is something that is very similar. And the goal here is really to reach about 250 words per minute in reading speed with good comprehension, obviously. So what you can do here is that you take a piece of text and you read it, but 3 times. And every time that you read it, you actually use a timer app and you try to read the same piece of text, but each time it has to be faster and with the same level of comprehension. And lastly, I want to talk about writing fluency. And so what you can do is actually set aside 10 minutes. And in 10 minutes, you need to write about something that you like. And don't worry too much about being accurate in terms of vocabulary, in terms of grammar, in terms of spelling. It's okay. Just write as much as possible in 10 minutes. And once you're done with the 10 minutes with an actual timer, you take a look and you count the number of words that you have written. You do this 2 or 3 times a week, and every time the goal is actually to increase the number of words that you're writing. Again, you're not focusing on spelling, you're not focusing on vocabulary, you're not focusing on grammar. You don't want to worry about mistakes because it's going to slow you down. The goal really here is to write as fast as possible. All right, so that's it for this video. I've given you a lot of activities that you can do to become fluent in a language in 6 months in a pretty lazy way. Now, as I said in the video, I actually made an app called Fluent Falcon, which is a flashcard application. You can make audio flashcards, and this is perfect for language learners who are looking to learn a language in a lazy way. I'm going to put a link to the video here on how to use Fluent Falcon to become fluent in a language, and so click on it if you're interested, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you, bye-bye.